Good morning. My name is Sam Adams, and I'm very delighted to be here with you all today. Beautiful venue. For those of you that don't know me, I'm a life coach and a high performance coach, and also a breathwork facilitator, which a lot of people find quite fascinating about how that works and how I bring that into my work. I've had the privilege of working with professional footballers, Team GB athletes, a couple of Olympians, and high-performance executives and business founders. I'm a huge sports fan. I'm an Arsenal supporter. Brighton, not forgetting you, Zoe, and also Lewis, not forgetting Steph and Kelly. And yeah, it's my utter privilege to moderate this panel for you. But before I bring on the three guests, I'm a breathwork coach. So I'm a breathwork facilitator, and our breath is probably the most underutilized free tool that we all have at our disposal. Most people think, oh, I can breathe. Yeah, you can. Whether you might not be breathing optimally, and you might not be breathing efficiently. But we can use our breath to quieten our minds, calm our nervous system, and help us focus. And this session that we're about to have is a really important session, and I really want your full attention for these three incredible panelists. So in order to do that, you've just had a coffee break and a wee and a chat, and you're probably all a bit buzzy. I want you to be really focused for this session. So we're just going to do 1 minute of square breathing, box breathing. You've probably heard of box breathing. Who's heard of box breathing? A couple people. It's a very simple breathwork technique that Navy SEALs actually use. And it really taps into your nervous system and helps you calm your nervous system. But most importantly, it clears your mind and gives you mental clarity and the ability to focus. Imagine being a Navy SEAL, right? At times, very intense situations, and you might need to focus. And I really want your attention for this session and to be focused on our amazing panelists. So play along with me here. So if I can get you to, you're all sitting up in your seats nicely. Sit upright without being too rigid. I love that you're all doing it. Fantastic. I thought I was going to come around and have to bully you. So sit nice and upright, but without being rigid. And if you feel comfortable, you can lower your gaze or drop your eyes. Rest one hand on your belly, if you feel comfortable to do that as well. Drop your chin slightly. And just close your mouth and breathe naturally through your nose. And just notice your breath. Maybe you'll notice a little sensation in your tummy, just a slight rise and fall. And now box breathing, square breathing, is also known as, is where we breathe in for the count of 4. We hold for the count of 4. We breathe out for the count of 4. And then we hold for the count of 4. It's a very simple technique. So we're all going to do that together. And you imagine a box, and you can trace the lines when you do your each 4 count. So let's all breathe in through our nose for the count of 4. 2, 3, 4. Hold for 4. 2, 3, 4. Out for 4. 2, 3, 4. Carry on that breath cycle in your own time. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. Hold for 4. Just notice your breath. Just focus on that count. Gentle breathing. There's no big breaths, no deep breaths. Your sole focus right now is just your breath. When you're ready, you can just open your eyes. Hopefully, you'll feel a little bit more focused now, and I'll bring on our amazing guests for this panel, which is called Empowering Brands, the Role of Data and Social Media in Women's Football. So please welcome to the stage Fiona Green, Christina Taylor, and Sophy Coombes-Roberts. Hello. Oh, okay. Did you do the breathing?
Yes.
Good. Okay, hopefully you're all focused now and present and in the room for this discussion today. So let me firstly introduce our panelists to you all. First up, at the far end from me is Fiona Green. Welcome, Fiona.
Hi.
Thank you for being here. I know you got in super late.
I did.
Or super early.
Or super late. Which way you look at it.
3 a.m. Fiona is the founder and CEO of Winners, which is a CRM and data consultancy. She is also the founder and CEO of Pro Data Stack, an AI-supported software for professional athletes. We thought it was 37 years in the sporting industry. It's actually 40 when we were having a chat.
40?
So
I've been saying 37 years for 3 years.
So there's a fountain of knowledge here and experience. And I know you've been in sort of data and technology for about
12.
The last 12 years. So yes, welcome. Thank you for being
It's
here.
good to be here. And thank you, Ed and Marius, for giving me the chance to wear this and feel a little bit like Madonna. Never had one of these before. Loving it.
Next up is Christina Taylor. Welcome, Christina. Thank you for being here. Christina is the founder of Aim High Sky Talent. She's also a personal brand and PR strategist to female footballers. And I just have to say none other than she works with Mary Earps, who I absolutely love. Yes. Who did the whoop?
Me. Sorry. Me.
Oh. And those of you who don't know Mary, and I'm sure you do, she used to play for Man United. She's the Lionesses goalkeeper and now is with Paris Saint-Germain. So welcome, Christina. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And finally, but not by any means least, is Sophy Coombes-Roberts, who is the lead consultant at Two Circles sports marketing agency based in Switzerland. Two Circles is actually a data-driven fan-first sports marketing agency, and they work heavily within women's football with the likes of UEFA, WSL, Liga F, amongst clubs as Arsenal, Chelsea and Tottenham. And Arsenal is one of my clubs. So, Sophie is also a competitive athlete. You play lacrosse for England and Wales, I believe.
Wales and Great Britain, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, Wales and Great Britain. Yeah, of course. And you've had 65 caps, I believe.
Wow.
Yeah. Currently out injured at the moment with an Achilles injury, but still making the most of the end of my career as well.
Brilliant. Well, welcome. So I'd like to give a round of applause again to our panelists. It's going to be an open, sort of fairly fluid conversation. Nothing too rigid. I like to keep things nice and casual and upbeat. So although, I might direct one of the questions to one of you, it really is for all of you. And if you feel like you've got a point that you want to get across, then, please interject and please, just share that. Feel free to rock the mic, as Ed would say. First question then, because you're all leaders in your respective fields. How do you see data and social media transforming the landscape for women's football in the next 5 years? Who wants to take that baton first?
I'll go first, I don't mind. So as a general principle, data and social media is transforming every sector of society, isn't it? But specifically, let's talk about women's football. So we've already heard today from other speakers some of the challenges that the sport has, lean resources, lean teams. Of course, one of the biggest benefits of social media is that it's free, yeah? Reach and engagement at a mass scale if you get the proposition right, at very limited cost. In other words, the only cost is your resources. There's no cost to actually play. When it comes to data, particularly the type of data that Sophie and I work with, as opposed to just market research or insights or knowledge, the type of data we work with isn't necessarily cheap. Having said that, the return on investment is significant. So I would hope that the women's game will be able to follow the trajectory, not of the men's game, not of sport in general, but actually the world, Spotify, Netflix, Amazon, etc., using data to increase revenue, engagement, participation, whatever their objectives are. But because there is more of a cost to it than the use of social media, do it at a framed level that's right for your business, right for your opportunity. So we just talked about some of Sophie's clients, some of Winner's clients. We apply the same principle to the AS Roma's men's team as we do the AS Roma's women's team, as we do British weightlifting, who have 3 full-time staff. The principles in the way you use data to achieve your goals is exactly the same, regardless of your business, regardless of your sport, regardless of your gender. It's just the framing, it's just the scale that differs. So I would like to see the women's game being able to use social media for its purpose And one of those purposes is to also drive people back to the organisation so that we can acquire that beautiful, rich first-party data. And I would like to see the women's game start to use first-party data, replicating other businesses out there.
Thanks, Fiona.
Yeah, I think I can pick up on that. When we think about growing women's football, and I think everyone in this room knows that women's football is on a journey, and it's a really exciting journey. And one of the reasons that I love working in women's football is because we don't know where it will be in 5 years. We don't know where it will be in 10 years. But if we're thinking about the optimum situation, we want to use data to both know our fans, to then be able to grow our fan base. And without understanding who your fans are, and whether that's as an athlete or a club or as a league, it will be almost impossible to grow. And we've got some great examples that we can talk about. You know, Arsenal is a great example of how they really identified that the knowledge they had of their men's fans was significantly different to the knowledge they had of their women's fans. And by investing in understanding who were buying tickets, who were coming to the games, what do they like about coming to the games, etc., they were then able to understand their fans better and start to grow their fan base. So I think growth is what everyone is trying to achieve. How do you get there? You get there through knowing your fans, which then ultimately, and the question that I'm sure anyone who works at an agency gets asked is, how can we make money? How can we grow our revenues? And ultimately, the way to do that is through understanding your fans, allows you to sell more tickets, allows you to sell your broadcast rights at a higher fee, allows you to sell your sponsorship, greater value of sponsorship deals, and then also allows you to open up revenue lines. But we do see that all comes through understanding your fan base first.
Yeah. Sorry, go on, Christina.
It's an interesting point to pick up on, because I work primarily around social media and personal brand. So I see myself actually probably more as a creative. I have a creative background in general. And so I hear that point, and we use data to look at what's going on with our athletes that we work with. However, as a creative, I also believe in disruption, and I believe in what Steve Jobs says, where he said that sometimes people don't know what they want until you give it to them.
Yeah.
And from a creative point of view, it's also about disrupting in an industry that is ready to be disrupted. So if we look at it, and it's a really important point, is that women's football fans are more engaged with the player than they are with the team. They follow the player more than they do the team. So personal brand of women's players and female players is extremely important to grow the game. And I keep saying this, in terms of, like, we haven't yet had our Michael Jordan. If you look, Michael Jordan brought basketball to the world, as is Steph Curry, as is LeBron James. You know, look
Caitlin Clark.
Yeah, Caitlin Clark, Alona
Yeah.
Maher. Like, when you get a significant athlete personal brand that stands out with personality, that brings the game to the world, and it also engages a lot more people. If we look at, and I'm talking about the UK, England, because I've studied it, you know, when we look at the income from the Premier League, a majority of the clubs, it's their biggest income is broadcast revenue. If we look at it from the women's game, it's commercial. And what's going to drive the commercial is the women, because they're more invested in those female players than they actually are in the club. So you need to utilize those female players to grow the game. So that's my perspective. Is I think people severely underestimate the importance of these women being profiled as role models for all the right reasons and to grow the game, but also from a business perspective. And I can speak on that because I know we've closed personal deals with some of the players we've got that are the same or more than club sponsorship deals, annual club sponsorship deals. So brands are ready to invest, but you've got to give them something to invest in. You've got to give them something exciting. And a majority of clubs, in my opinion, at the moment, they're not that exciting. They're quite stagnant in what they're doing. And I think the space is ready for a lot of creative disruption.
And as a fan myself, and I spoke about Mary before, and you're so right about that point. You know, I used to watch a lot of men's football. I barely watch any at all now. It's all about the women's game. And when Mary, and I'm thinking about like Lucy Bronze when she went to Barcelona, so I started taking way more interest in Barcelona as a club than I ever had before. And it's the same with Mary now going to PSG. I'm interested in the player, and I've gone, you know, my eyes are now on PSG and what they're doing, whereas before I had no interest in that at all. So you make a really valid point about, you know, as a fan, it's not so much about the club, it is about those individual athletes.
Can I ask Christina a question? I use a stat in my sales pitch. that I got from Investec, that female athletes can currently earn 10 times more in their off-the-field deals than their on-the-field fees. Wow.
Yeah. And if you're a top athlete, I'd say it's more than 10 times. It's way more than 10 times your
So
earn.
that's great for the athletes to be able to commercialise their brand, but it kind of gives the teams, leagues and events a bit of an opportunity to...
Yeah, and that's definitely something we'll come on to talk about that and how it can benefit clubs and, you know, other organisers. I guess you kind of touched on this a little bit, but, you know, what are the most important steps, I guess, teams and athletes should be taking to understand their audience in the women's football? What do you think, really?
I can go. I think from a team perspective, as much data capture as possible, and actually, Fiona, you talked about cost. Data capture initiatives don't have to be expensive, but at the moment, the number of clubs that ask their ticket buyers anything about themselves in the women's game is pretty low. Okay. So generally, we would get, if we're lucky, we would get gender and we would get age, right. And that's about it. But how can you, first of all, make sure that we're asking these questions, we're understanding, you know, who your ticket buyers are, but also what's really important in any sport, but especially women's sport, where we see generally a younger profile of attendees. Maybe it's their parents who are buying tickets, which is fine, you can know to market to them. But every person who is stepping foot in your stadium on match day, who are they? But what do they like? Why have they come? Who have they come with? Then taking that one step further, who's going on your website? Who's clicked on your store and hasn't bought an item? Who's on your social media profile? Who is watching on television? And actually what's really unique about women's sport and all of the data and research that we have is that the people who are watching women's football are not the same people who are attending, and they are not the same people who are following on social media.
Right.
And this is a challenge that we have. There is a more traditional sports audience, and this is by and large taking an average, a more traditional sports audience is watching on television. Mm-hmm. In terms of those attending the games, it tends to be either big groups, so women coming in groups, or families tend to dominate attendance. And then on social media, it is, again, generally a Gen Z going into Gen Alpha type generation. And then you start to learn a bit more about the fan behaviours of women's football fans, and I think something that's a really interesting takeaway that came out of a bit of research that we did recently is that women's football fans, in comparison to men's football fans, but also in comparison to people who are fans of both men's and women's football fans, are less likely to consume on television. Right. They trend higher than any other group in terms of discussing sport, not women's sport, but sport in their social situations. And they will spend on average between 2.5 and 3 hours consuming sport and social media. If you compare that to a men's football fan, it's half that. It's about 1.5 hours. Mm-hmm. So it's just thinking about how can you talk to those fans in a different way. If you truly understand how they behave, you'll market to those fans in a different way to as you would for your men's fans. Yeah.
So it's about being more diverse, I guess, with it.
And not treating the properties in the same way.
Yeah.
It's so easy. It is so easy to try and take what's worked in another sport, what's worked in basketball, what's worked on the men's side of a club or a league, and apply it for a women's side. But actually, there is a lot of data to prove that they are a distinct group of fans.
And just for anyone else who might be a bit like me, and I'm, you know, a few years older than the panelists, Gen Alpha is that 12? Is that
under 12? Gen
under
Alpha.
12, like, okay. I look Gen Z, Gen
and actually, a really, again, another data point. I'll try and throw out as many data points as I can, and if you have questions on them, you can ask me afterwards. But fans of men's football tend to be made between the ages of 6 and 10. Fans of women's football tend to be made between the ages of 14 and 20. So what this is telling us is there's a huge opportunity to convert fans to women's football at an earlier age. There's much more visibility of men's football product for people, boys, girls of a younger age than there is of a women's football product. So starting to think about what your Gen Alpha strategy is, what your strategy is for those 14-year-olds is actually something we're really encouraging everyone in the market to start thinking about.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Sophie.
Can I add to
Yeah,
this?
please do.
I really like data, I do, but then I think a lot of it's also about contextualizing it. So there's a reason why that younger Gen Alpha haven't been exposed to women's football. It's a structural issue as well, and it can't be ignored. It can't just be solved through marketing. And I think that's what needs to be looked at, a bit more of a holistic view of things, that we can't just take data and just look at it for what it is. You have to contextualize it and look at the structural issues around women's football. And what really frustrates me about women's football, I've got a lot of third sector experience. Long story, I still run a social enterprise dance school. And sometimes I feel like women's football is treated like a third sector business organization, as opposed to a startup that requires investment. And it really frustrates me that you'll get a lot of people that will get millions for an idea, a tech idea that no one knows if they're going to work and it's invested in. But you look at women's football and people will go, oh, don't know about that. You know, it's a struggle to extract a lot of the time from, I feel, a lot of brands that don't have the intel and insight into what's going on, which is where the data then does prove useful. But yeah, I think we need to just remember that it's about contextualizing and the structural issues around women's football that have occurred and that need dismantling in order to grow.
Yeah,
Christina, just out of curiosity, do you know Mercury 13?
Yeah.
Oh my God, how exciting.
Yeah.
Just wanted to make sure you were.
We could talk about that one as well another time. Thank you for Christina for that. Okay, let's move on a little bit. I guess, in your experience, and how can clubs and athletes use the data or the social media to create stronger bonds with or more meaningful connections, I guess, with their fan bases? Christina, do you want to start?
Yeah. So my just to give context, my experience is very varied. So I've been working in, let's say, I'm going to say influencer management for better want of a word. I landed in commercial management of female players because I was doing influencer and PR management. So my background's actually a lot more creative. I choreographed ads, I choreographed for artists, and etc. And one of the biggest things that I think is missing is the kind of lifestyle crossover. I feel like sometimes we can, in this industry, be very focused on women's football, but there's a lot of lifestyle crossover. Like, one thing that I'm waiting for, especially in the WSL, we're kind of getting there. Look at Lauren James, she's doing it a bit, is like that lifestyle crossover of her into music, fashion. We can't just be keep these women in football. We need to cross over in order to reach other audiences from a brand and marketing perspective. And I think that's a massive one. So for instance, before we went to, hopefully I can say this candidly in here. If any of you know the story of Mary and what happened around the World Cup with the goalkeeper shirts, it looks as if we orchestrated her bringing out shirts before, bringing out her own clothing line after finding out about the goalkeeper's shirt situation. That wasn't the case at all. I said to Mary that I don't understand how no one's got a kind of no female footballer has a clothing line that fans can buy. That makes no sense. Let's just try it, take it to market, and then we can look at whether that's going to work. And it landed at that point. So it's just about noticing, to me, but maybe that's because I come from out of football, obvious gaps in the market. You go into a sports shop, there's no section for women's football. Women's sport, it makes no sense. There's such a gap. I look at that, I don't need data to tell me that. It's obvious. You pick up on that and you just throw something at the wall, see what sticks.
I think taking that point about fashion, we were talking about it last night, it's a huge opportunity, and that again is an example of not treating the women's game in the same way as you might the men's game. Look at what's happening in the WNBA. If anyone's a women's basketball fan, if you're watching in Europe, not in the US, on their WNBA League Pass, at every halftime, Google Pixel sponsors the WNBA Fits, which is essentially when all the basketball players at the beginning of the game arrive, it's branded Google Pixel, and people are interested in what they're wearing. And then not only is the league commercializing that, then all of the individual clubs have their own sponsors, which comes up on the social media channels. Las Vegas Aces, Fits, sponsored by, and it is often a clothing brand. So there's two sponsorships, one for the club, one for the league, all related to Fits. That is just something that doesn't happen in women's football. It doesn't happen in netball. It doesn't happen in kind of other sports, but it also doesn't happen in that many men's sports either. it's just this great opportunity. And you talk about we need people from outside of sport to come in and to be able to show what are the different opportunities and how can we commercialise them.
It's also a structural issue because we had a very, very nice Louis Vuitton fit for Mary to wear on a signing, and PSG told her she can't because they've got a suit sponsor, and she had to go in some plain brown suit. So that's what we're talking about, is about re-looking at how it's structured and how it can be changed.
Yeah, and being very creative with it.
Yeah.
You've really got to think outside the box. Sorry.
But back to your original question about how can the women's game use data and social media, it's back to Sophie's point, that we use data and whether that's structured data or Twitter data or whatever, to understand more about our customers. And our customers aren't just our fans, they're also our participants, our volunteers, our sponsors, our members of the media. So that's fundamentally what we do. We use the data to understand. And once we understand who they are, what they're interested in, we can then figure out how to give it to them. Yeah. So we live in a society today where we're all time poor. We're so time poor. And what we're looking for is easy solutions to what we're after. And whenever I'm doing a workshop on the role of data, to demonstrate how time poor we are, and I wonder how many of you will align with this, I just ask people to remember what they feel like when they go into a shop and they go to buy something and they go to swipe the card and the shopkeeper says, oh no, can you insert it instead? And we go, oh, for goodness sake. It takes us like an extra 1.8 seconds, but we're not happy about it.
No.
That's how time poor we are. So what data allows us to do is to understand what everybody in this room, everybody in our stadiums, everybody on the soccer pitches, what they're actually interested in. What do they want from us as an athlete, as a club, as a governing body? And then we can put in place strategies to actually give it to them. Make it easy for them to say yes. Give them the Amazon effect. You know, you're interested in this, so why not buy that? You're interested in this, why not look at that? Other people who look like you have bought this, why don't you take a look at it as well? That's the same sort of principle that we use data for, and we should be doing in the women's game. And we will be. And we are doing. Sophie's got clients doing it, we've got clients doing it.
Absolutely. I love the stuff about, you know, more meaningful connections, because, like, in terms of these players are brands. You know, they've got their own identity, and I, as a fan, I'm interested in what Mary's doing outside. Like, she's been doing this #Mary in Paris, which is brilliant, and I love that. I want to see that. I want to know what she's up to, what she's into. You know, any athlete that I'm, you know, I don't know. I think that's women are generally. I think we're more like that. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. You guys know the facts and figures, but I think as women fans looking at other athletes, that's what we want to know, all of that stuff as well, and it connects us.
I think from my perspective in the field that I'm working in, what I notice is, so we take on athletes. I'll take on a female athlete if I believe in them. I don't charge them to do anything. We monetize off the 20% that we get from all of their commercial deals. Because the simple fact of the matter is, the men's game is so different to the women's game, whereas I work with a couple of men's players, but I'll work within their team, and they have enough money to do that. Whereas the women, they don't have that money. So it's really difficult for them to come by this advice and this person standing beside them day to day to be able to grow them. And that's a real stumbling block for a lot of these women, that they just don't have the capacity. And that, even things like that, that's what I'm saying, we can have all the data in the world, but we need to look at the context of it. I've spoke to clubs about just making sure they have a personal brand manager for the girls, because it benefits everybody, because they can't afford to do it, you know?
I was just going to, coming on to my next question, really, around the role of collaboration between clubs, players, and brands in maximising, you know, data uses and social media engagement for growing the game. So, like, is these two working, well, these three parties working together, you know.
It would be ideal, but unfortunately it doesn't happen as much as you would want it to, as much as it should do. In an ideal world, when it comes to the sport of football, it would start with FIFA, governing body, then down to the regional confederations, and then down to the national governing bodies, then the leagues, then the clubs, and then the athletes, and working across the whole sort of pyramid to ensure that everybody benefits. And when it comes to the world of data, sharing data legally, using data compliance, cross-referencing data, it just doesn't happen, because at the end of the day, we're in a commercial world, and unfortunately, the brands have, the clubs, the teams, the leagues, the governing bodies, the athletes have to think about what's right for them. We would love to see a world where, amongst our national governing body clients, there's a way that we're trickling down data to individual clubs and
But
even
do you
to
see a
individual
way that
athletes.
there
Yeah,
can
there's
be this-
absolutely a way, both legally, technically, strategically, common sensibly, there is without a doubt. And it does happen in some areas. I think the Rugby Football League in the UK copies the model of Major League Soccer and many of the governing bodies in the States, where it's much more centralised approach. We would love a new football startup league in Europe to show that it's possible here as well. Maybe the WSL, the new WSL might
maybe I
do
can
that. It'd be
talk to-
wonderful.
Yeah.
Two examples of where we are trying to initiate collaboration, and we're doing it through the WSL and the MWSL. We run a collective insights program where we will bring insights from ticketing, from social media, from web and app users, and pull them together in digestible formats that all of the clubs within those leagues can learn from. That's something, as you say, that happens in rugby because they are all sit under the same investment banner. But it is tough to enable collaboration. I truly believe collaboration is something we see more of in women's sport than we do in men's.
But Sophie, it's not just about the insights. The more valuable data is the first-party data.
Of course.
Knowing that if you're a fan of Liverpool and you're a fan of England and you're a fan of a particular Liverpool player, having access to that individual fan. Insights are great. The research is fantastic, and we can share whatever we want. But it's actually sharing the database of fans under full data legislation. That would be the utopian scenario. We're nowhere near close to that. No. We are in the Rugby Football League. We are in certain rights owners in the States.
Rare, I would say, within the sports. For that collaboration to happen, for clubs to share with other clubs, I don't think
clubs
rare.
will ever share. That's what I'm saying. Not clubs with other clubs. Players with clubs, with governing bodies, with regional federations, with the international federations.
Clubs with clubs. Is about growing the game. We want to grow the game, and collaboration surely is the route to that. Sorry,
I mean, I can't speak from a data point of view, but I can speak from a brand point of view. And the easiest club that I've worked with, or organisation I've worked with by far, as you can probably imagine, for commercial purposes, is Manchester United.
Yeah.
Like their support with the women's in terms of like, if I ask for something, or if like. So we still got Gabby George, who's at Man United now. So I've been explaining to them, like, you know, I want to push Gabby's TikTok, so can you make sure you do more? We have a group where we just talk about this stuff on a day-to-day. So I think there's also something to be done with clubs and making sure that they support their players in the best manner possible from my perspective. But Man United do it incredibly well, to be fair to them. But I push for that. So Gabby's got me, Mary had me to push for that.
Yeah.
But not every female player will have that commercial partner, agent, PR, brand strategist, whatever you want, that will push for that to capitalise on it. So that's
Christina,
also a factor.
Can I give you a task then to test the theory of what we're debating? Please push Man United. Say, can you please use your database to find me the Gabby fans, the fans within the Man United database who are actually fans of Gabby, and work out a strategy for me to actually be able to use that data myself for Gabby's personal benefit. That's where I think you'll hit a brick wall. I hope you don't, and I'd love you to genuinely request that and then report back, because I'd love Man United
next
to do
year
it.
we'll report back.
No, next week. Next week.
Next week,
let's
but
get
we'll
this
find
moving
out
quickly.
next year.
Yeah. But that's where I think you'll find the collaboration stops, because the value of a fan's personal data is so high that the clubs, teams, leagues, governing bodies, etc., are too protective
But there's not
around
enough
don't
of
think
this
they'd have
data
it.
either.
I actually don't think they would have that data.
I think Man United would. They'll know.
I don't think they would. Per player.
Another task for you, Christina. Find out if they know. I would hope they do.
Because I think we spoke about that, didn't we? That these clubs, you know, you're the experts here. There isn't enough of this data. They're not collecting enough
Well,
of
it's
their
really
fan
easy
data.
to find out if you're a fan of a particular player, if nothing more.
But you have to
watch the
ask.
content. You just watch the content they're clicking on, either in the email or on website. You're absolutely right that the best way to get accurate first-party data is to ask somebody. But how many people want to ask and answer questions? You want to get through that form as quickly as possible. Too many questions, there's too many. So we watch what they're clicking on. That's how we find out if they're a fan.
I often get data that I'm not meant to have through personal relationships. But
Do
I'm
you?
not, yeah,
Be
but
careful
I'm
you're
not
not breaching GDPR.
No.
€20 million fine,
No,
Christina.
no, not like that. But just in terms of, not personal fan data, just in terms of data of...
Information.
That organisations have that people will share with me, if you know what I mean. So sometimes I understand personal fan data is not going to be accessible in that manner, but sometimes
But it can be,
relationships
and
do
that's
help.
the point.
Yeah.
I do think, and we talked about this, I do think there is a huge lack of data
Yeah.
At a deeper level. Like generally when we're working with any of the clubs, leagues, we don't work with athletes, so I can't speak to an athlete perspective. We do not know enough, and whether it's, we don't ask the questions, but we also don't run the analysis. We have a very top level view, but actually when it comes to which team do you support? Do you attend? Who's your favourite player? By and large, we don't have this information.
Right. So there definitely needs to be more data collection. Thank you for that. I'm loving this discussion. I hope you all are as well.
Can I ask a question on this?
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, cool.
I'm genuinely interested because when I've just studied my MBA in football, and from my perspective, when I was researching, there isn't a lot of data on a lot of women's football anyway, so I'd be surprised if they even research player data for women's football, a majority of the clubs. Do you know or not? Fan data for women's players.
Yeah, so data is the biggest small world in the world. It could mean lots and lots of different things. It could mean information, a sound bite, or it could mean actual structured databases. So an easy tactic you can employ, which we employ for our clients, to help understand who in their database are fans of the women's game, is literally when you're sending out campaigns, and I'm talking about email marketing campaigns here, track the people that are clicking on the link related to a women's story, women's game story. So, for example, Football Association of Wales, they'll send out an email with 6 pieces of content in it. 4 will be about the men's game, 2 will be about the women's game. You can tell who's clicking on a piece of content. If they're clicking on a piece of content about the women's game, they must be interested, yeah? If they're clicking on if Man United send out a piece of content about the women's team, their most recent game, Gabby played a blinder, somebody clicks on the story about Gabby, probably a fan of Gabby, yeah? So we can ask them, but as I've said, asking people to fill in forms can be quite tiresome for people. I don't want to punch in my card, I want to swipe it, I don't have time. So we just watch their behaviour. And there is a lot of opportunity to collect that data. Okay. Whether people are actually doing it or not is up for debate. But that's why task Man United with that question next week. See what they say.
You can write it in my group
I'll
chat.
write it. No. Yeah, I'll send you the words. You
can
copy
write
and
it in my
paste
group
it into
chat.
your email. I would hope with Man United's level of data maturity, because they are very data mature, I would hope they're doing that. I would be staggered if they're not.
We'll look forward to hearing back.
And if they're not, I'll pitch them with a proposal to do it for them.
I'm not sure if everyone in the audience is aware, but today is World Mental Health Day. Something very close to my heart, and working with high performers, and all of us, I'm sure, get impacted by mental health at some point. But data, access to data for the players, social media, whilst it can be a force for good, it can also have its negative sides. I'm pretty sure, Christina, this is an area you can speak to around this. So when it comes to athlete mental health and fan interaction, how do you balance the benefits of engagement with the potential downsides? Because clearly we want players to be using social media, some of these platforms. It's good for them, it's good for brands, and it can be good for the benefit of the club, but there are downsides.
There's 2 things I'll say on this. From my perspective, I haven't done as much but obviously Mary's not been at PSG that long, but I'm talking Mary now because her profile grew really quickly, so her negative has been a lot more prolific than a lot of the other players. So Man United are really supportive with that.
Okay.
So Man United in England are really supportive. So if I need anything, to be honest, I'll go to them. But also, whenever Mary wants a social media break, I have her social logins now.
Right.
So I'll just post, if she has an ad or something, so that she doesn't have to go on social media, I can post it for her. And that just helps give her a mental break. So we can manage her social media. She does all of her social media, but it's just those times when she needs a break. I still okay everything with her, but I can post for her now, just to give her that break.
But even if you give her a break from posting, you don't give her a break from seeing the results. You don't give her a break from seeing. She has to give that herself, doesn't she? She has to. What I mean is, she has to stay off the apps.
Yeah.
If she wants to have a break from.
Yeah. So she stays off them, and then we'll post and do what we need to do.
But not even read what people are sending.
Yeah.
So I guess really what you're saying is, in terms of the player, is getting the club support.
Yeah, club and country if they're playing country.
Yeah. So because obviously you can't just put it upon the player to recognise, oh, you know, you need a break from this.
Yeah.
They need support from the club and, you know, people like yourself as well.
England have been amazing. I
yeah.
feel like I have a mentorship with the English
That's
FA.
good to hear.
Yeah, I can call them about anything, and there's been times where Mary's been on shoots and they've even just come to support.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
Brilliant.
just in terms from a media point of view.
I'd like that
So-
repeated in capital letters because we don't hear enough positivity about the FA. So I think that's
Yeah.
fantastic
Yeah,
news.
no, they've been
It's great to
amazing.
hear.
They've been amazing. Yeah.
That's brilliant.
So there's positive sides to it that we can use, but equally the clubs also need to take on the role of offering that support because we know there are negative downsides to it, and even data. And you know, you know, when players got access to information about their, you know, how they're performing this week to last week, you know, there's a lot of stress and a lot of tension, and that has a mental impact, right? I mean, data is great, but it can also have a negative impact, surely, on the players.
It's interesting because Mary's actually just done an interview about this. It was released this week on She's a Baller, if anyone wants to see it. And she was actually saying she wants more data in the women's game because she feels like a lot of the targeting, which she was talking about WSL at the moment, well, at this point in time, basically the person, she always says to me, so in women's football, a lot of the time, the person with the loudest voice gets heard because there's not enough data, like the goal line technology, the camera angles, the, you know, all of that sort of stuff. She said you can't have an accurate discussion. So the person, so if someone's gunning for you, regardless of like what's actually happened, because there's not enough data,
Right.
their voice is heard.
Okay.
Can I just reframe
Yeah.
the way you're talking about data having negative connotations? So fundamentally, data is there to help you make decisions. It doesn't make the decision for you.
yeah.
Back to your point about contextualizing, we use data as a foundation on which to make those decisions. So when we look at why data could be perceived as negative, it could be because when you finally get the facts, you realise you're not doing as well as you thought you were. I mean, that's
It's the
you know,
pressure of that, though,
but
isn't
then
it?
if
Seeing
we
it in
turn
black
that
and
around
white.
and say, well, if I know what I'm not doing well, I know what I need to do to improve. So the principle behind data is tell me what I'm doing well, tell me what I'm not doing so well, and tell me what I
But
need
it's
to
the
do to
way
improve.
that information is transferred across
Yeah,
to the
of
player,
course, and
because
that's-
everyone takes
yeah.
on information in different ways. You know, Mary might be able to take that data
Yeah.
and, oh, you haven't played
And
this.
be excited about
Yeah,
it.
and like, okay, this is what I need to work on. But another player might take that and it's a criticism, and it actually, you know, we're talking about mental health here. So it's thinking
that's
about
why-
how the sharing of the data as well.
But that's why the support around the player is incredibly important
Exactly.
in every single aspect, whether it's like the emotional, mental, financial,
Yeah.
brand, PR.
But by the way, on that point, and you just brought it up about Mary, actually athletes don't have a lot of access to their own performance data.
Yeah.
The clubs retain it, the governing bodies retain it, and it's a massive discussion point. I don't know if you know about Project Red Card in the UK.
No.
Project Red Card is a class action lawsuit with 1,000 footballers, 400 Premier League footballers taking action against the authorities, the FA, the Premier League, etc., claiming that performance data is theirs and they deserve to have it.
Yeah.
It's going to fail. It has no value. Sorry, put that on record. Yeah, I believe it's going to fail. It has no value as a class action lawsuit. But what it's done is bring to the forefront of the discussion this fact that athletes, footballers particularly, should have access to their own performance data. So what we are expecting to see is in the next edition of the data framework, which is this license signed by the multiple relevant parties, there is going to be some additional caveat or carve out to support players. What this actually boils down to, though, is players having access to data. What they actually want is a share of the revenue that
Right.
the data generates when the FA and the Premier League sell it to betting companies, etc. So the point is players do
Right,
not
okay.
actually have access to as much data as you'd like to think. And Mary's saying the same thing to Christina.
I find that incredible. that
Well, it's
they
why we
don't-
set up the second business, the software that we've set up, to provide athletes with that direct access. Because you're right, it should be more freely accessible
But yeah,
to
and
them.
surely it's a collaborative thing again, because if the players got more knowledge around, you know, their
Yeah,
performance, you know,
100%.
that they know the areas to, yeah, sure, they're getting coaching, but as an individual and their personal responsibility to, you know, look at the information
Yeah.
around themselves, that makes them a better athlete, that makes them a better club participant, that's
Yeah.
great for the club, and surely there's, you know, just all round, that's a great bit, you know, it's a
It
better
was one
business
of,
model.
one of my proudest moments in the development of the software where we signed a licence with the agent of a 19-year-old footballer in Cardiff. He plays for Cardiff City. He's Wales under 21. He said, I can't believe it, Fiona. He said, I go and sit in the manager's room, and the manager just hits me with all these stats. I now have the ability to hit him back. Yeah, seriously, because athletes have not been given that access for a while, or forever. So class action lawsuit, we've developed technology. The industry's getting better and better.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm pretty sure you'll agree this is a really good discussion and really beneficial. I just want to, there won't be any question and answers, but we are going to go to a fairly long lunch break. So please come and find these amazing women and ask them any questions that you're curious about. Before we finish up, I've got a bunch of questions. We are not going to get through them all because it's just been such a great conversation. But I would like to ask you, if there was one question that you wish I'd asked you, what was that question and what will your answer be?
What should somebody do if they're doing nothing right now? How should they start? And if they're already doing something now, how should they get better at it? What could they do?
Okay.
Can you give me a minute to think?
Sorry?
I need to
Yeah,
think.
okay, we'll go to Sophie.
I can say, because we've talked a lot about athletes and we've talked about Christina, you talked about the structural issues that athletes have. I think ultimately, the way that we move forward with this is getting more money into the game. And how do we do that? It is at the league level. It is at the top level. The leagues need to start generating greater revenues that then go down into the clubs, that then go down into the athletes. And that is, I think there's so much that we could have talked about around data and sponsorship and the power and actually the demand that we're seeing from sponsors 5 years ago. I've got to, there's a nice stat that in 2022, I think less than 30% of brands sponsoring in the whole sports industry were digital first. You were seeing like your classic beer brand, your car brands, etc. Now, just two years later, 60% of brands who are sponsoring sport are digital first.
Right.
So that could be Uber, Amazon, Revolut, Google Pixel, and they are demanding more. We are currently, I spend most of my time working on UEFA Women's Football, and we're now in the market for selling for the next cycle, for the next 5 years, and we are aggressively demanding higher fees, sponsorship fees, than we ever have done before. Mm-hmm. But what they need in return, if you're asking for more and more, you're showing the value of the product, you have to be able to back it up. And that is where we're finding that our data is so important. Sponsors are demanding more and more hardcore first-party data. Who are your fans? How are they behaving? How can we reach them? Are they the right people that for my brand or actually not? And I think women's football is now, maybe 5 years ago, you might have sponsored women's football for a great purpose-led campaign or because it was the right thing to do for your brand. And now brands want to see financial benefits. So data is so helpful for that. And I think I could talk about that for hours, but... Well,
we've got 2 hours after this, so people can come and find you. Christina?
I think it would be why is supporting women's football important, and then zooming out and looking at the bigger picture. Mm-hmm. I read a stat the other day that said 94% of C-suite female leaders have engaged in elite sport. And if we look at the fact that, or some type of sport, like played at a high level sport, and if we look at that alone, it tells us the skills that our young women and girls are learning from engaging in sport. And football is the biggest sport in the world. Yeah. So what better way to do it through women's sport? So just remembering that journey that, okay, we're talking about elite sport and monetizing and commercializing, but what are the other, what's the wider impact of growing women's football? And I think that's incredibly important to remember, that we're all here on a mission, not only to commercialize and monetize, but really it empowers a lot of young females.
Yeah, absolutely. It did wonders for me at school. It was, as somebody, I struggled in school and I had a difficult upbringing. I'm not going to give you my sob story, but sport literally saved my life as a kid. Yeah. There's no question. And I know, going back to your point about the 94% women C-suite, you had lunch with Hillary Clinton, didn't you, 2 weeks ago? Yeah. And that's where that stat comes from, right? Yeah. Because she talks about it.
Yeah. We 2 weeks ago in New York, I was invited to a dinner where 32 women from around the world looking at how to further women in sport were there. So you had the likes of Sophia Bush, Ashlyn Harris, Hillary Clinton, Michelle Kang's team, the owner of the New York Liberties, Lisa Klaveness, who's the head of the FA for Norway, men's and women's. And we just sat at dinner talking about how we further women's sport. And actually, the Americans, obviously, I think it's something like over 50% of the women's elite sports market is based in the US, and these women are really driving for change. The US governor, the governor of New York was there, the state governor of New Mexico was there, talking about the importance of women's sport to female development and empowerment, which is beyond just sport.
Yeah. And it's interesting, I work, as I said, with some athletes, but other high performers, and the executives and some of the business owners that I've worked with, and I work predominantly with women, have all done some kind of sport, and they are into their sport, and maybe that's why they work with me, because I love my sport, but there is a definite trend with that, definite trend. Awesome. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish, I would like to give a round of applause to our three panellists, Fiona, Christina and Sophie. Thank you so much for your focused attention. I hope the breathwork helped. Please come and find these ladies in the break. We've got a 2-hour break. I know Adriana is probably going to come up and share a little bit more about that. But yeah, we haven't had time for the questions. Apologies for that. But please, yes, come up and speak to these women and use the 2 hours wisely to ask any questions that you had. We've had a meaningful discussion, a really nice open conversation, and I want to thank you for that and your participation.
Thank you very much.
And thank you everybody for your attention. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.